Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Livable Roadways meeting. And before we get going, we will take a minute and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. So I think I heard we do have a quorum. Do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
I haven't seen any. But I'll check if they just joined. Any comments or chat? I'm going to quickly check my email, but nobody added any public comment this morning. Nope. We're all clear.
Okay, good. So we'll close public comment. We have the minutes for the May minutes in your folder. Any questions or comments on those? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
And if somebody would unmute themselves, because you all have access to unmute yourself to make motions.
This is Karen Kress. I move.
All right, so Kress makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Carlos Ramirez seconds.
Who is that?
Carlos Ramirez.
Carlos. Okay. Thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. All right, so we have 2 action items for the day. We'll start with Paul Flores, the Vision Zero Speed Management Action Plan. I just want to add 2 because we have this presentation and then the tip following that. We want to be mindful of the time. Both of these are important projects, and what we'll do for both of them is, as you have questions, if you want to type them in the chat, so then at the end of each presentation, we can go back and take the questions in the order in which they were received. So that way we could just allow the presenter to get through the entire presentation, and then we can go back and pick everything out. And then I think Paula is on the line. So as she gets ready to go, I also want to introduce one of our new members, Christine Crespo-Valentin. She is the representative now for the American Society of Landscape Architects. She's with WGI. She works, I know she's a resident of the area, and some of her work and some of her focus is, I think, critical in terms of what we're talking about in terms of having livable roadways and walkable roadways, and the value of having some of the projects like landscaping, but also making for a more walkable environment. So we're glad to have her as a representative for the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Okay.
Paula, it looks like you're ready to go. So whenever you're ready.
I have a little timeout though. Little
Yes.
point of business. You flew over it real quick before I could give you a little heads up. Technically, the May and March minutes were approved verbally when we weren't allowed to do action items virtually. So I just would like us to formally reapprove those virtually today so that we can count them as officially handled. There weren't any comments, and they were unanimously approved back in, March and April. So if we could just have motions for those 2 items, that'd be great.
And they have to be taken individually. It can't be a motion to accept.
I think we could do both together because, again, they've already been handled verbally. We're just now formally acknowledging them.
Okay, so do I have a motion then to approve the minutes of the February and March meetings?
Matt Lewis, so moved.
Thank you, Matt. Do I have a second?
This is David Hay. That's a second.
Thank you, David. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
Okay, and then Christina is unmuted if she just wants to say hi to the group.
Yes, thank you. I was just waiting for an opportunity, not sure if I would get one, but thank you all. I'm very excited to be part of the group. I hope to be able to contribute in the future greatly. Again, thanks very much. Thanks, Michael, for introducing me to the group, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Christine. So, yes, sorry to just kind of skip over your own introduction and take that thunder away from you. So Paula, are you ready to go?
Can someone confirm what they're seeing?
Yeah, we could see the presentation with the next slide and notes on the right of it.
I have changed the display settings. I'm everybody unmute except for me.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I can hear you. Thank you. So I'm going to go through this. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and the committee members. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go through this presentation really quickly, but before I start, I really wanted to impress on you to take a look at the detailed presentation you have in front of you in your packet. That was prepared for a meeting of the stakeholder group a couple months ago, and it's very detailed. So I'm going to give you the cliff notes on this. But before we get started, I just want to go quickly over the study objectives. We only had one goal, which was to improve public health and safety by reducing road fatalities and serious injuries. But we have some comprehensive outcomes that come out of this study that talk about improved safety experience for all users, increased awareness of speeding and aggressive driving. Institutionalizing good practices is really, really important. But also coming up with supportive policies, programs, and infrastructure improvements that allow us to meet the safety goals. And of course, we can't do this without all our stakeholders and our cooperating partners because it is a complex system. The study had 5 different tasks. I'm going to go through some of these tasks really, really quickly because of the time constraints we have this morning. I'll start with the stakeholder engagement program. On this slide, you'll see all the different partners that we had, from the county to the city to the state, law enforcement, health department, and transit providers. This group and representatives from these groups did join us for 3 major meetings last May, in October, and just in April as we presented the final or the draft recommendations for this study. But these partners were very important. Their feedback, not only in giving us guidance in some of the prioritization factors that I'll talk about a little later, but they were also very important in sharing with us their experiences with some of the countermeasures, countermeasures that are already being used on some of the quarters, such as Fletcher, for example. But more importantly, what are some of the other countermeasures that they thought would also work really well in our community based on their knowledge of some of these quarters. So partnerships were very important. The practices, we did look at what is our current practice locally by all the various agencies, what's happening across the state. But because this is an emerging practice, we're really looking at, what are the federal recommendations and the national best practices that are happening throughout the nation. And one of those tools has been the US DOT has had a publication since 2014 that talks about speed management program planning and all the attributes that must be in the plan. And as you'll see through these bulleted items that we have in here, it talks about setting speeds that are appropriate and desirable and safe, talks about applying road design and traffic operations. It is data driven and so forth. And some of these outcomes and some of this stuff is very repetitive based on our goals and objectives that we laid out for this study. One of the tasks that we put a lot of time and effort was we've identified, or actually the Vision Zero Action Plan had identified the top 20 high injury network corridors for our community. But how do you prioritize them? Where do you start when you have such little available funding to truly address some of the concerns exhibited in these corridors? So we started, evaluating these corridors by starting with speed. And as we know through Vision Zero, speed is critical in trying to prevent fatalities and serious injuries. So this table that we see in front of you is our evaluation of the posted speed limit versus the context class. And what we found, for the top 20 quarters was that there's a disconnect, where when I compared just simply the posted speed limit for these quarters versus the national best practices according to ITE and the CNU publication back from 2010, 70% of the quarters had posted speeds in excess of national practice by at least 5 to 10 miles an hour, and 15% of those quarters have posted speeds of 15 to 20 miles an hour above the national best practices. This is critical. This is very important to acknowledge that we have a problem, and it's a very serious one in our streets. And another thing that I wanted to mention about this is this concept of speed is critical because, if you may or may not be aware of this, if a vehicle is traveling at 40 miles an hour and you do get hit as a pedestrian, the chances of survival is less than 20%. But if a vehicle was driving at 20 miles an hour, chances of survival in a crash is closer to 80%. So speed does matter, and it is very critical. Next slide, I just want to brief through this really quickly. These are some of the statistics related to some of the fatal crashes that we observed in the top 20 quarters over the last 5 years. And a couple of things I'll say about this. Close to 60% of the crashes, the fatal crashes that are happening in these quarters occur at non-intersections. This is different from the norm. So there's something happening in our quarters that we really have to take a look at. 83% of the fatal crashes are happening off peak, not during the peak hours when we have more significant traffic on the quarters. We also have 71% of all these fatal crashes had contributing factors related to aggressive driving and speeding, erratic, reckless, aggravated maneuvers, running off the road, and so forth. So we have a concern in these quarters, and it's very important that we look at some of these factors and really start to look deep into what is causing some of this to happen in our community. Part of the stakeholder involvement group, they had identified various prioritization factors that I mentioned earlier for consideration. So what we've done, we went through these factors, we looked at the information and data that we had available, and we created this risk performance level that is very simple. And it just says this, if a risk performance level, it says this, if it is high, if the risk is high in terms of crashes and speeds and volumes, then that means the higher the exposure on some of these quarters, the more likely the severity of crashes, hence the more likely we gave you more points for all of these factors and becomes a higher priority for us to tackle. So we went through all of these factors. We looked at all of the 20 quarters. We applied those factors to all of them. We weighted all these averages across. And the final column is actually the final scoring that was developed based on the methodology. And what it shows is the quarters in orange on the last column there are the highest priority quarters based on not just crash severity, but paid by crashes per mile, schools per mile, equity in communities of concern, the speed issue that I talked about, the exposure from transit routes in these quarters, and the high volumes. And what we identified was, for example, Brandon Boulevard, Hillsborough Avenue, Fletcher Avenue, Dale Mabry, Bruce B. Downs, Sheldon Road, Kennedy, and Florida Avenue become one of the highest priorities out of the top 20, where we should start investing and give not only funding, but also attention to these quarters based on these factors. So as part of the stakeholder involvement, especially coming out of the county says, we're already working on some of these quarters, what's next for us? So we were tasked to look at what is the next 30 high injury quarters throughout the county. So we started all over again from scratch, looking at all of the data. And this is a list. I know it's It's at times hard to read it, but includes other major corridors in our community, such as MLK, Big Bend Road, Bush Boulevard, Waters Avenue popped up, Hillsborough Avenue extensions, all through North Tampa, all the way to the east, and so forth. So here's the list. The map on the right shows you the existing top 20 corridors in blue, and then the next 30 corridors for this total 50 in the green shade. So when you look at this, we've got all the major arterials in our community in Hillsborough County covered and identified as crash corridors. And it's a lot of them, and we have to start now to really start making an impact on resolving why there's so many fatal crashes and serious injuries on these corridors. We did the same thing. We prioritized these next 30 corridors. We rated them the same way as I explained before, and what the table shows is actually we have about a few more corridors that actually are highly rated, higher rating score than some of the ones that were in the top 20. But that's okay. We have a priority now that we could start tackling some of these corridors. So I'm going to get into the specific strategies and countermeasures right now, and I'm going to go through these very, very fast, but I wanted to impress upon you the importance of Vision Zero principles. Safety is complex, and in order to save some of to have safe travel for all users, we have to create safe streets, we have to create safe speeds, safe vehicles, and safe people. And when I think as a professional that a third of the US population does not drive, especially the most vulnerable, then safe people should be our first priority. And focusing on safe people and creating safe conditions then has positive outcomes in our community, including walkability, livability, connectivity between neighborhoods that provides access, for schools, jobs, employment, and so forth. So that is why we focus on people first. So what we did, we ended up creating this aggressive driving crash countermeasures toolkit. And this toolkit is specialized. It documents good traffic calming measures, but it is based on a lot of national and international good practices, but tailored to Hillsborough County based on what we saw in these top 20 and top 50 corridors. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of these toolkits, and they are categorized by safe people, safe streets, safe operations, and education, and so forth. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that other speed management practices don't put this together. They just reference traffic calming measures, but really don't put it all in one place for quick, easy access. And we also have taken the time to take a look at and show you, which is the various columns, where are they appropriate in an urban environment, in the context class right below it, in the suburban environment, or in the rural, is it applicable? And then is it applicable at an intersection, spot treatment, for example, or is it appropriate in slow streets, or what we refer to as more neighborhood streets, or is it applicable in higher volume and bigger roads such as arterials and corridors? So safe people here, we're talking about raised pedestrian crossings, wider sidewalks, and make the suggestion 8 foot or minimum to be a standard, not a wish list. Talk about separating sidewalks from the travel lanes, mid-block pedestrian crossings, all sorts of different tools, that you can go through, adding bike lanes, shade trees, and so forth. So I have the full list of a lot of wonderful techniques that we could be incorporating to address how to improve conditions for walkers. We also talk about safe streets. Again, the same thing. Here's a whole bunch of countermeasures where they're applicable. And so forth. But for safe streets, how do we incorporate some of the best traffic calming, narrower travel lanes, roundabouts, raised intersections, eliminating acceleration lanes that we found in a lot of our corridors that are completely inappropriate in urbanized areas. Going back to two-way streets, and of course, we always have to think about the context class. Where are we? Are we in a urbanized area? Are we in a rural area? Making sure everything is appropriate for that context. Another one, we continue here with safe streets. We found in a lot of these corridors that we have freeway interchanges touching down on our corridors, our communities. One example is on Dale Mabry, where we had flyover corridors and with high speed, freeway interchanges. So how do you make sure that these freeway interchanges are designed and redesigned for the appropriate speeds? Why are they not, built to provide continuous bike lanes through them? Some of them have already good pedestrian connections, but they're not still ideal. At the bottom of this table, I also talked about traffic operations. How do you coordinate traffic signals at a target speed? We need to incorporate more traffic signals to break up long blocks that actually cause speeding, and these additional traffic signals will provide better access for pedestrians and connectivity between neighborhoods and so forth. So it's a long list. The toolkit also talks about targeted enforcement and automated enforcement and more speed cameras, education campaigns and PSAs on aggressive driving and respect for all users. So we have a huge list of a lot of things that we can all be doing. So I'm going to go really quickly through this next section, okay? I want to refer you to the packet in front of you because it has detailed actions and how you achieve some of those actions. So I'm going to give you a cliff notes on only the high level actions at this point. So the first section of actions that we're recommending is how to set speed limits. And we have to really spend some time looking at regional context class. The state already has one. The county needs to do that for all their roads, but it also has to be integrated with our land use policies and making sure that it clearly defines, the community that those roads are in. These actions are also color coded. There's a little chart at the bottom. We tried to say short-term improvements, things that could be done within, or actions that could be done between one and the next couple of years, midterm, and then long-term that probably will be 5 years before we can actually start making headway into, not start in 5 years, but rather start to see some outcomes from those actions. So engineering and operations, we have 8 action items that we identified. We have to start tackling these quarters, not just, the top 20, but all of them that we've addressed in order of priority based on the system that was developed. We have to start changing our design manuals and design standards to allow, both for road construction, engineering, planning, operations, and maintenance. We have to incorporate more flexibility to reflect national best practices, which is something that's missing in some of the what is national and federal policies are guidelines, but then at the local levels, they become standards, which makes it very difficult to implement some of these countermeasures that have been identified. So we have to go through all of this and really take a hard look at some of these things that drive or prevent us from achieving some of the goals that are mentioned in various, Vision Zero Action Plan and now this Speed Management Action Plan. We have to educate, and we have to educate everybody. We have to educate our public, we have to educate our professionals, we have to educate our elected officials that oftentimes are the ones making the final decisions on how, not only what projects we're entertaining, but how we fund them. We need to encourage adoption of speed management policy and so forth, and really work on the PSA messages that develop that educational piece for the political officials, for the public, for the practitioners in our field, and so forth. And of course, we will be, through this process, going to be working on establishing a more equitable enforcement practices that could lend itself to really meet some of the goals. The last is policy and legislation. And I can't emphasize enough, we often talk about just the engineering or the planning because it's what we do. But there's too much that needs to be done when it comes to policies and legislation, including supporting changes to laws and regulations that are necessary to ensure that people are protected to the greatest extent possible. We have to set firm Vision Zero crash reduction goals that actually will get us somewhere, and not something 25 years down the road, but something within the next 5 to 10 years that we really should push for. And all of these other actions that we have listed here. The last one is plan evaluation. You know, we have to develop evaluation metrics and timeframes for this plan, and we're recommending quarterly updates to the speed management action plan to make sure it gets off its feet right from the get-go. But we also have to start evaluating, you know, in qualitative and quantitative measures. And these quantitative measures is about speed reduction. It's about crash reduction. It's about serious injury fatality reduction, most important of all. You know, and it's about, you know, the number of quarters that we are fixing proactively or reactively and that are being addressed. You know, you do not measure safety projects based on volume to capacity ratios. So we have to really think about what are those metrics and how do we truly evaluate progress in really saving lives in our community. With that said, just to wrap it up right now, you know, the stakeholder group is reviewing the draft plan. We did write a text document that covers the extensive slide set that you have in front of you and everything that's been accomplished. We will finalize the actual action plan based on any comments that we receive. But at this moment, we are requesting this committee to approve the speed management action plan as identified in front of you, and forward it to the MPO board for their approval. So with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in front of you and to and I'll take any questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Paula. I just wanted to take a minute and thank you for this. I think it seems like such a no-brainer, some of this stuff, but some of the policies and projects that you outlined that would actually make a difference. One of them is, you mentioned in there, painted intersections. We're going to talk about in our new business today an effort that's going to be on June 27th. Several projects, several intersections in the city are going to be part of a mural day. And just the value of the cost benefit of painting an intersection and the safety benefits that can come of that. You know, I think the education part that you went over, sometimes it's just letting people know that a very small investment can have a big impact. So thank you for that. Does anyone, I know, Matt, you made some comments in the chat. Is there anything that, Matt, that you wanted to add before we call for any other comments and questions and consider a motion?
No, I just want to add, Paula, this is really great work. I think this is going to be good for Hillsborough County and the community. And we're working on really introducing contact class into our comprehensive plan. One of the things the state did when they did it is they used the existing land use condition and existing roadway network in their contacts classification. I can understand why they did it, but as local governments, we have a little bit more flexibility to think about our future land use and what we want our communities to look like in the future. So we're doing it that way. Thanks.
That's wonderful. It's something that needs to be reminded of all of us as professionals in this industry, that conditions change. You know, especially in a region like Florida and Hillsborough County and Tampa, where there's so much growth happening, that some of these land use policies and everything else that builds from it has to be updated to reflect not just our current changes, but also our future changes and our vision. So thank you very much for considering that.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Matt, I do. So this is Larry Josephson.
Go ahead, sir.
Paula, are you aware that at the county we're already assigning context classification to all of our roadways?
If you are, that is wonderful. We need to publish it. We need to make it public so everybody has access to it. And that is wonderful. I know that even from the start of this project to today, there has been so much happening behind the scenes with our partners that it's time for us to get all this stuff out, right? It's even to say we're working on this and we have to celebrate that we're making headway. So that is wonderful.
So have you coordinated with anybody at Hillsborough County on this issue?
We have put together the tables. They have seen these tables. Hopefully there isn't too many variations in what the county is doing versus what is shown on them. And if there is, then let's talk about it.
Actually, this is Lisa Silva with MPO, and I can say that we are definitely coordinating on that. We're in constant contact. Gina Torres is the project manager for the speed management study, so she has regular contact with Leland Dickens and Bob Campbell and Richard Rank. In fact, I announced last month in new business because I thought Livable Roadways in particular would be very interested. Hillsborough County has requested that we host a workshop to discuss all the great work that you guys are doing that are related to the implementation of the speed management policies, including that contacts classification project, the design tech manuals, et cetera. And that is anticipated to be July 20th at 1:30 in partnership with the Technical Advisory Committee and anyone else from the public that wants to do that. I was going to remind everybody under new business, but then it was just too perfect to remind everybody now that if you want to see how we're like meshing all together, that would be a great opportunity to tune in and provide your expertise.
Okay, well, I just wanted to let Paula know that not only are we assigning contacts classification, we're assigning target speeds, and we're assigning new typical sections for all of our future roadways, and that have to do with interfacing with the context class. And we're also identifying retrofits if the corridor already has a existing right-of-way identified. We're identifying retrofit to.
That's wonderful, and I have heard that some of that is in the works right now.
Sounds like Arizona has a question.
I think you, I see what you put there. Hey, hold on.
Okay, Arizona, you're on mute. First, I think we needed you to repeat how you're on mute. So did you try one more time? Still on mute. Oh, here, let me see if I can unmute you for you. Okay. I think we're both unmuting you at the same time. Okay, it says you're. Maybe I can speak with Arizona after the meeting and get that question over to you, Paula, and handle it that way, because I've attempted several times to get him unmuted and he's self-muted. So,
Lisa?
Yeah.
Thank you for unmuting me. This is Gina Torres, guys. I just wanted to jump in if I could.
What you did.
Oh, now I can hear Arizona.
I didn't want to say that we are doing a good job with that because I'm on the board, and the good sidewalks, the wide sidewalks and the lanes, and the sidewalks, we want to make sure that we get all that in together, all right?
I heard some good job with sidewalks and lighting and yeah. Okay. Okay, Gina, did you have something more to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit more to Larry. I think you covered it, Lisa, but I just wanted him to understand that the county was a huge addition to the stakeholders during the development of the Speed Management Action Plan. They thoroughly were involved. We changed a lot of the priorities, or some of them, because of their input specifically. And because of their support, and I'm really talking about Leland, for instance, he was so impressed really with the speed management action plan that he wants to figure out how to make sure that the context classifications that have been assigned and the development of the design manual, the cross sections, really help advance what we are noting in our speed management action plan. So he has requested that we look at those context classifications and the designs that you referred to, Larry, to make sure that we're, the proposed posted speeds and the designs are all kind of working together to make sure that we aren't making it easy for people to drive too fast for those roadways. So basically, I'm just letting you know that this has been hugely coordinated, and we are even going further and having some other work with the staff at the county to make them aware of our products and to learn about yours.
Yeah.
Thanks for that information. I didn't know if Leland hasn't told me that he had been directly coordinating with you, or Bob hasn't told me, but that's great, and appreciate that input. I just wanted to make sure that that was happening.
Yes.
All right, everybody hold the date, July 20th, 1:30. Okay, I'm going to make Sarah the presenter. She's next up. Oh, wait, we have to take action, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I was just saying that we need to make sure that we have the beacon when they come down the crossing the street, then maybe we have enough time to get across the street.
Right.
Maybe people in wheelchairs and walkers, they walk a little bit slower than normal. So add a little more time to the beacons.
Right. So you have time to, with the countdown, to adequately get across. Yeah, that's another factor that's important.
Correct. And some of the countermeasures that are identified for pedestrian accessibility and making it more comfortable is even integration of medians where you can, walk or halfway to the intersection and safely pause and then walk the other way. So there's a lot of, including what you're mentioning, signals that are a little bit more sensitive to slower, if it's through a disability and people in wheelchairs, or if it's the elderly, which we have a huge population here in our community. It's like we walk slower. Not everybody's a jog, is a jock and young and can walk really fast across the street. So that is going to be contextually. You have to consider the demographics of any quarter and what kind of additional means you have to incorporate into a project to safely get people across it safely. Very good point. Thank you so much, Arizona.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, so we do have a motion to consider. The recommended action was to approve the Vision Zero Speed Management Action Plan and forward to the MPO for approval. Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Karen Kress. I move approval.
Thank you, Karen.
Arizona, you get a second.
Thank you, Arizona. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Yep.
So, presenter now.
We'll move to the tip presentation. Sarah McKinley, whenever you're ready.
All right. Do you see my screen?
We do.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, for those of you that don't know, I'm Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. Today I'll be going over the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 21 through 25. And then the second half of the presentation will deal with our priority update for future candidate projects for future funding. So as far as what the tip is and how it's organized, The Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, is the 5-year work program. And so it's what is funded over the next 5 years. Since we have a newly adopted long-range plan, it's really those first 5 years that were adopted within that. We also, through the TIP update, the first half of the presentation will look at sort of the major highlights of what changed between last year's TIP and this year's. So again, we just highlight major changes and new projects. And then the main point of this is sort of the financial plan of what is funded. And we are federally required to show each project by phase and funding per year. When we're done and this is approved, this is sent off to USDOT for authorization of federal funds. And then in the tail end of the
I was talking with Patrick about
projects for information purposes.
a line of cabinets up high on the wall.
I think you need to mute yourself.
Below the edge of the
Yeah,
ceiling.
hang on a second, Sarah.
Both in the living room and.
All right, thank you. So as far as the MPO's role in the program, we do have our priority list, which I'll go over in the second half. That is sort of our wish list of projects that we'd like to see funded in future years. And we have some control over prioritizing projects for certain funding types or funding categories. The first two are federal sources. This includes our transportation alternatives. So any non-motorized projects, as well as the surface transportation program. And this is sort of that other federal portion that can go towards pretty much any project that we prioritize to our discretion. There's also 2 state sources that we work on a region-wide basis. This is coordinated through the Chair's Coordinating Group. These categories include the Transportation Regional Incentives Program, as well as the Sun Trail Program. And I'll point out, we did this past year finally get our first sort of allotment of that Sun Trail monies. As far as removing projects, the MPO board does have the ability to remove federally funded projects, but once that money is removed through the work program, it sort of goes back into the district's pot of funds. So then after that, we cannot direct how that money is reallocated. As far as where we're at right now in the process, the MPO last updated the priorities and the document in June of 2019. So we do this every year. It's an annual update. In November of December of this year, we reviewed the tentative work program. So this is sort of the first opportunity that we get every year to see what those new highlights are expected to be. And then in April, we get a slightly modified, what we call a snapshot. And that's what is used to develop the document in the work program section that we'll be reviewing today. There is a public hearing that is scheduled for June 30th. At that, again, we'll update the 5-year work program, so that section 1 of the document, as well as updating the priority list, which is also known as table 2 in the document. From there, we will we have a little bit of time to then make any edits and clean up from what comes out of the public hearing, and then submit to the federal and state agencies for review by July 15th. So as far as what's in the work program this year, this year's accounts for just over $3.6 billion. There is about $1.2 billion in federal, and then just over $2 billion in state. I just wanted to point out the reason the state and the total is higher this year is because this does account for the $1.4 billion for the West Shore interchange. So we have slightly higher allocations, and that'll largely be towards the I guess, capacity projects because of that large allocation for the West Shore interchange. The local matches account for about 360 million, and then about 54 million within the toll bonds funding sources. Our local projects, again, those can be found at the back of the document, account for about 2.1 billion. All right, as far as the breakdown in funds for the FDOT work program, again, about 3.6 billion. And as you can see, the road widening, like I said, accounts for over half of the budget this year, or for the next 5 years, because it does include that West Shore interchange project now. The bridges and maintenance, this includes also the resurfacing, it's about 14%. And then transit and transit demand management, about 5%. Our intersections, interchanges, and signals is about 10%. And then our walk bike, the percentage overall dropped this year. And this isn't saying that the allocation of money dropped. It's, again, we're looking at percentages, accounts for about 1% this year. This is a table, excuse me, that we've included over the last few years that just shows the fluctuation of the percentages through the work program through the years. And as you can see, the capacity projects have sort of overtaken the breakdown of funding for this 5-year work program. As far as the local capital improvement programs, the ports and airports continue to be a large portion of this, because this is looking at the local capital improvement programs, and the airport is still continuing to go through their upgrades and renovations, as well as the port accounts for a large portion of on-port and off-port projects as well. Bridges and maintenance, so resurfacing is about 10%. Road widening is down to about 3%. Our walk bike still, again, accounts for about 1% in this, with transit, TDM, and then intersections and signals accounting for 2% and 4% respectively. As far as those, about 15 million that I said that as an agency we prioritize for funding sources, this looks at those transportation and surface transportation fund, what's funded within the work program now. We have the Vision Zero corridor studies that are going on right now. That funding was advanced. We also have the couple bridge replacements studies going on for the county. The Highland redesign, that was moved up. We also continue to prioritize monies for HART bus replacements, as well as looking at technology along the corridors parallel to the interstate to sort of help relieve congestion. This is known as the Integrated Corridor Management Project. And then we have a number of walk bike safety improvements, including the Doyle Carlton Roundabout, Central and Ola Avenues. We were able to fund the final 2 portions of the Green Spine, some El Prado street improvements. Florabraska has moved back into the work program and is being advanced for the complete street work along there, as well as Kennedy Boulevard is being funded through a number of different projects, but there is a large walk bike component within this. And then Florida Ave has some new signalized crosswalks that are going in. And then the West River Greenway, we were able to fund the final connection to Stewart Middle School for that. All right, so as far as the major projects that are the highlights within the new work program, this is the section where I said we'll go over sort of what's in the next 5 years to be funded and what was different from last year. Just sort of as an overview, in November we did adopt the It's Time Hillsborough 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. And within this, like we had in our previous plan, we looked at sort of performance measures and programs We did modify these somewhat, slightly. The preserving the system is now known as Good Repair and Resiliency. Our safety program has been retitled Vision Zero, as well as our ITS technology, sort of managing congestion, is now our Smart Cities program. We maintained the real choices when not driving. And then we have our major capacities for economic growth. We also include our performance targets within this document as well, and have been adopted into the TIP. As far as our Good Repair and Resiliency, there are a number of resurfacings included within the work program. We also have our transit projects maintaining the level of service that's existing. So this is our HART bus replacements, as well as our HART bus stop capital. This allocates $4 million annually for bus replacements, and then $1 million annually for the bus stop capital. We also have few bridge repair and improvement projects, one specifically I-75 over the Alafia River, and then some substructure repair throughout Hillsborough County. All right, our Vision Zero projects, we have quite a few design projects. That's what the PE stands for, is the design that was funded. We have the Fowler Avenue from I-75 to I-275, looking at safety enhancements, as well as some complete street safety projects on 21st Avenue, 22nd Street, 109th Avenue, and Tampa Palms Boulevard. These were all FDOT related projects. They all have design added for fiscal year 21. We have a new project, or a new priority, that was added by the City of Tampa, that funding has been advanced in 21 as well. This is looking at Interbay from Manhattan to Bayshore. We continue to get lighting projects at various locations throughout Hillsborough County. We also have the 40th Street from State Road 60 to Hillsborough. This was originally slated as a roundabout project and as an existing priority. This is advancing into, the project development and environmental phase, which will have additional rounds of outreach. And we also have the 50th 56th Street from 60 or State 60 to Fletcher. This is another Vision Zero study looking at operational improvements, and this is from FDOT as well. For our Smart Cities category, we have the Florida Avenue at Idlewild and Knollwood. These are, like I mentioned, the two signalized pedestrian crossings. We also have some interchange improvements on I-4, and a new one added from west of County Line Road to add some turn lanes to County Line Road. We also have our intelligent transportation systems, looking at State Road 600 from Gandy Boulevard, or the Gandy Bridge, to Dale Mabry. So this is adding technology near the intersection of Gandy and Dale Mabry to the Gandy Bridge to help once the construction is finalized there. As far as our real choices, we got some trails funding this year through that. The two final phases of the Green Spine. So this is the far west on Cash Street, and then the far eastern portion on 15th. Those are the final two phases, and construction's been funded for fiscal year 22. We also have the West River Greenway. This was that final connection to Stewart Middle School, construction in fiscal year 24. And then the South Coast Greenway, this Big Bend pedestrian overpass. This was, as I mentioned before, our first bit of Sun Trail money that we've received within the county. And this is for design for fiscal year 21. And then what comes out of that design would move forward with the Big Bend interchange improvements as well. As far as our major investments, I-75 at Gibsonton interchange, that now is a top priority for the MPO, the state, and Hillsborough County. We've been working to advance from the sort of Band-Aid improvements that were already funded to try to get the ultimate build design done. So we have design that was added for fiscal year 25, and we'll continue to work with the partner agencies to do what we can as an MPO and prioritizing this through the region to try to get those monies funded even sooner. As far as our Tampa Bay Next, where we are with the status of that, the Howard Franklin Bridge is fully funded. That has moved to table 1 as fully funded for construction. We also have the State Road 60 West Shore Interchange. Again, that's been completely funded. We also then have the I-275 from Lois Ave to Willow. This is the express lanes that will feed in and out of the West Shore Interchange and end just west of the river. This has also been funded for design build. The downtown interchange, there is a small portion of the operational improvements that's been funded. This is sort of the from westbound westbound I-4 to northbound 275. This will be sort of the receiving lanes on that turn there. And then we also have the I-275 from MLK to Bush. These are the adding 2 lanes north of downtown. This is still unfunded. And this map is just in here for your reference. All right, so that was it for what is different between the new work program for fiscal year 21 through 25. This next portion of the presentation will look at the tip priorities for future year funding. So that could be then prioritized and funded in the next tip in the new 5th year. So again, we tie this to our long-range transportation plan update, and listed below each of the categories is sort of how we rank those projects. So based on the type of project, it gets put into one of these programs, and then based on the criteria is how we rank it. So for good repair and resiliency, we look at, again, transit state of good repair, bridges and resurfacing, and those all sort of get ranked at the top of the list. We then move into our Vision Zero program, where we look at total crashes, as well as our severe crashes, and then calculate them out into crashes per mile. As far as our Smart Cities program, we look at our travel time reliability, and then our real choices when not driving. We look at our density rating based on population and jobs. So how does it increase accessibility between where people live and where they work? Our final program is our major investments, and this is where we look at job density as well as the future forecast for congestion there. All right. So when updating our priorities, these are done along with the work program updates. So we're sort of updating 2 major items within one public hearing. Our the priorities were last updated at the public hearing June 11th last year. And then in February was sort of when we began the prioritization process with each of the agencies. And we meet, sort of go sit with each agency, review their previous existing priorities, and then discuss any new priorities that they might have. In March, they provide us a letter with their updated priorities. And then any of these that require any grant applications must be submitted to DOT by March 31st. In May and June, as we are doing right now, is when we go through the priority list. I should note that in March of this year, we did have a workshop with our policy group to discuss the proposed new priorities as well. Sorry. All right, as far as our new priority requests that we've received this year, These are ones that have been submitted through that letter that we received from some of the agencies this year. T-BARTA Vanpool requested $800,000 for fiscal year 26. We are recommending $200,000 annually to help support the Vanpool program. The Interbay from West Shore to Bay Shore, this was submitted by City of Tampa. I mentioned in the previous section that design was added to the work program. This request is for just over $4.5 million for construction of the walk bike safety improvements. We also have Twigs from Ashley to Nebraska, again looking at safety enhancements. And the request was just over $3 million for the construction of this project. We have State Road 574, MLK from US 301 to Turkey Creek Road. This is looking at safety improvements. This was submitted by FDOT. And looking at, it's a very long corridor, and looking at safety improvements, medians, bike lanes, all sorts, filling in sidewalk gaps, ADA improvements, innovative intersections, all throughout that corridor. The one here in red is one that we met with the City of Tampa late in May about, and have just been requested to add it into the priority list. This is what is known as the North Downtown Grid Multimodal Improvements, aka Ashley Drive from 275 safety improvements. The city has requested $5.2 million for construction in fiscal year 26 for this project. Great. Additional priorities include, we have 2 signal that were requested by the City of Tampa. This is at State Road 60 at 26th Street, and then Spruce Boy Scout at Manhattan Avenue. We also have a request for State Road 60 from east of Dover to Polk County line. This is looking at intersection improvements and innovative safety upgrades throughout the corridor. Hart requested a CSX study, so there's $3.5 million requested for this. We also have the Fowler Avenue underpass. PD&E was requested from Temple Terrace. Hart also requested some electric bus infrastructure and some automated vehicle facilities and infrastructure. As far as our regional coordination, this is all being done through the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee, and we have quite a bit of funded priorities. Let me see, sorry. We have our funded priorities, including the Howard Franklin Bridge, the Gateway Express, the I-75 interchange in Pasco County at Overpass Road, I-275 Express Lane from I-375 to Gandy, the I-75 interchange at Big Bend. This is in Hillsborough County, as well as the State Road 60 interchange, and then the Central Avenue BRT in Pinellas County. As far as the unfunded priorities go, again, I-75 at Gibsonton, this is a major priority for us, and we'll keep working forward to getting that advanced. We have I-75 at Overpass Road, the Phase 2, this is in Pasco. The I-275 operational improvements north of downtown, as well as the Central Polk Parkway, this is in Polk County. US 41 from State Road 44 to State Road 200. This is in Manatee County, as well as the DeSoto Bridge replacement, and then the Bradenton Palmetto connector. We also have the Regional Rapid Transit. This is the ongoing T-BARTA study in the I-275 corridor, and then finally supporting Hart and any negotiations with CSX, including right-of-way. All right, that wraps up my presentation. You can see the recommended action here. This is to approve the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 21 through 25, as well as the Transportation Improvement Program priorities for future funding. So that, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Sarah. just in the chat, I know Kathy Coyle had a comment about the walk bike moving up to 14% in terms of the allocations, and you saw there in some of the new projects that were requested. And then Matt Lewis, you had a question about Florida Avenue.
Yeah, I think I must have just missed that part of the presentation. I know it was on the list, but is that part of the walk bike? Is that part of the 14%?
Yeah, those are 2 additional crosswalks that are moving forward. There still is the Heights Mobility Plan that also includes that corridor that is still just in a design phase as well. So those are just 2 construction projects that have come out of that overall plan.
Sarah Hendricks, you have a question too?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I was just curious in the previous slides for the various priorities. I think in the rightmost column, it shows various priorities and requests for funds. If it just says that it's requested, does that mean that the recommendation is to fund it in full?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
because
Only the HEART programs, the TBARTA program, and the there is a educational program under the Safety Vision Zero program. Those are the 4 that we recommend annual allocations rather than full lump sums, because those are ongoing programs.
Okay, so like for example, with TBARTA's van pool request for 800,000, they would be actually getting the 800,000. It would just be allocated over 200,000 per year. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but it could go beyond that total 800,000. So it could go beyond just the 4 years. We also had a request and are updating the, it will be included in the tip priority table to include the use of TDM strategies for those monies as well, to sort of give them more flexibility in the use of those monies.
Okay, thanks.
And Sarah, I have a question about just kind of overall. Can you explain, whether or not this document and the program will be impacted or potentially impacted by, say, any loss of federal dollars in the future, just because of the downturn in the economy and changes in gas tax revenue? Is that built into any of the models? This potential that we may be in an economic downturn, at least for the next 12 months, based on COVID-19?
I don't work specifically for work program. I'm not sure if anybody from FDOT is on the call today that can help answer this. With federal funds and the flow of taxes, because I mean, even the National Highway Fund's been hit with the lack of gas revenue and everything. So there could be some uncertainty as far as projects like the West Shore Interchange. I believe those are already funded out of existing allocated sources. So I can't say with 100% certainty that this is completely secure within those 5 years, but this is based on what work program has for their forecasted revenues, what they were able to allocate funds towards.
Great. I know. Alex Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Alex Henry, FTC staff. I can speak to a little bit. I don't work directly in work program, but we work with them. I know that basically the outer years of our work programs are for planning purposes, and the amounts that we assume are available are based on revenue forecasts and projections. So there is a potential that, based on some of the impacts we're seeing, we could experience decreased revenue, and that might cause us to move some projects. We had a little bit of that a couple years back when we had some unexpected costs in association with hurricane relief, and we had to push a couple projects. So, I think it is possible, but too early to say, certainly.
And then Beth, is there something that you're able to add to?
Hi, good morning, Beth Alden, MPO staff. And so just to build on what Alex was saying, and of course we do want to emphasize that the Department of Transportation is very committed to the first 3 years of the work program, and will work very hard to maintain funding for the projects in those first 3 years. But what we are hearing at the state level is that the statewide revenue estimating conference is still working on what the fiscal impacts will be statewide. Just locally, in looking at the sales tax revenues that are coming to Hillsborough County, May was down about 10% over the previous year. So that, I mean, that gives you some indication. I mean, it's down. It's not disastrous, but definitely down. And what we've heard also from FDOT Central Office is that they're looking at the state of Florida as a whole is still hoping that there will be some kind of funding support from the federal government before making any kind of announcement about what the fiscal impact will be in the state budget.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just from what I've heard, and maybe some other folks on the call have heard, it's sort of, I guess, maybe cautious optimism, for some of the bigger projects like the West Shore Interchange, where it is programmed out and there's confidence that existing funds can go forward. But like Alex alluded to, some of these other projects that have been on the list for quite a while, as we were saying earlier, a smaller project that is, $2 million or $4 million that has a larger benefit. Sometimes those are the ones that, may remain on the sheet of paper as opposed to turning dirt. So just wanted to bring that up for our committee members. Most of you are probably have the same understanding of it, but maybe a few folks haven't been in the same conversations. Any other comments or questions about the tip? Okay, seeing none, we do have a recommended action, recommend approval of the tip for fiscal years 2021 through 24-25. Do we have a motion?
This is David. I'd move the tip.
Thank you, David. Do we have a second?
This is Casey Dagenhart. I'll second.
Thank you, Casey. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay,
Hello,
thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Arizona.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, was there any money for transportation to be extended during the hours? Because people need to have a little bit longer hours to get it out. Is there any more money for that?
That was not requested as part of HART's priority. We typically don't fund service through the priorities. I know that they have been working through the transit group at FDOT to try to work on some extended hours and some new routes, and also focusing on increased service for a couple of the urban core routes to get those from 30 to 15 minutes. I can follow with Heart staff and try to get that presentation to you. But as part of the TIP priority process, that's not something that we've typically funded in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, let me just make sure I do this right one more time. So the motion was to recommend approval of the TIP for fiscal year 2021 through 24-25. The motion was made by David Hay. The second was made by Casey. Make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Casey Dagenhart. So let's just do one more vote one more time, because I want to make sure that Arizona got his comment in there. So like I said, that's the motion recommended, the motion by Hay, second by Dagenhart. Any further discussion?
Yes, just a second, just to clarify that this is a double whammy. We're approving the TIP for 21-25 and then the priorities for 22 through 26. So it's combined that presentation that you saw by Sarah, and that's a combined motion.
Yeah, you can do it as one combined motion, or you can do them separately. Typically, the other committees just do one motion.
Well, then we'll do that too, just to make it easy. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so the motion passes, and the TIP passes, and the priorities pass. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. So our next presentation, we have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next presentation, the Florida Transportation Plan and Highway Safety Plan update. Alex Henry, whenever you're ready.
Great. Can everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you. Looks great.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So good morning, Livable Roadways committees. My name is Alex Henry. I am the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Public Involvement Coordinator for FDOT District 7. And today I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the update to the Florida Transportation Plan, or FTP, as well as an update of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan update that is happening in coordination with the update to the Florida Transportation Plan. So basically, I'll just be providing a brief overview of what the FTP and the Highway Safety Plan are, the process that goes into updating both of these documents, and then some key things that we're looking at as part of those updates, as well as some opportunities for you all to get involved. So what is the FTP? Basically, it is the single overreaching statewide plan for all of Florida that is tasked with guiding Florida's transportation future. The FTP provides policy guidance and establishes a framework that guides all of our planning activities and programs, which in turn helps influence the projects that are ultimately developed and inevitably programmed into the FDOT work program. So it's kind of our guiding framework that establishes our priorities, and everything that we do kind of flows from the framework that it establishes. Why does the Florida Transportation Plan matter? Just some examples of how previous updates to the plan have kind of really helped to shape Florida's transportation futures. The 2000 updates to the FTP included the introduction of the Strategic Intermodal System, or SIS, which has completely kind of redefined the way that we make large investments in our regional highway system across the state of Florida. 2005 was a new focus on regional visioning and collaboration. The 2010 FTP brought about a very close alignment with Florida's plan for economic development, as well as mobility and trade. And our most recent update to the FTP, the one that we're currently on in 2015, introduce concepts of resiliency, which, as we'll talk about, we're building upon in this new FTP update. Workforce development, which we're beginning to see piloted in some of our major reconstruction projects that are being funded around the Tampa Bay area, and notably as well choices. So a new emphasis on providing additional choices in transportation as opposed to traditional approach to a single occupancy vehicle, which we've really seen the impacts of in a lot of our statewide guidance over the course of the last 5 years. The introduction of a statewide complete streets policy being kind of a key outcome that in part stems from renewed focus on choices. So the priorities that we establish and the goals that we establish and our strategies that we identify as part of this plan really have lasting effects in how our transportation system moves forward. The FTP has 3 major elements, the first of which is the vision element, which is a very high-level document that looks at 50 years and tries to identify major trends, uncertainties, and themes that we feel are going to have the potential to shape the future of Florida's transportation over a long period, say 50 years. This element is typically pretty visual and provides kind of graphics, infographics, statistics, just kind of establishing these trends and what we see as potentially being some of their long-term impacts to kind of set the stage for some of the major themes and trends that we're likely going to be dealing with over the course of the next 50 years. The second component is the policy element, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of the FTP. It looks at about 25 years in alignment with MPO's LRTP process and establishes goals and objectives that will basically be guiding transportation decision-making and investments throughout that time period. The third element is our implementation element, which looks at a shorter horizon, so 5 to 25 years. So looking at 5 years in the work program and beyond, and is really focused on how we can come up with specific programs and projects that will help to advance the goals and objectives that are established in the policy element. So we have a 34-member steering committee that is tasked with helping us guide the update process. So the steering committee includes a variety of different agencies, federal agencies such as the Federal Highway Administration, other state governmental agencies such as the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health, coalitions of regional and local agencies such as the MPO and the Florida League of Cities, as well as non-governmental agencies, organizations, and stakeholders such as AARP and the Rails to Trails Conservatory. So a really diverse group of stakeholders with different kinds of perspectives to help provide their unique input and help us form the plan in a way that meets the needs of all Floridians. In addition to the steering committee, we've also established 3 different subcommittees that comprise of members of the larger subcommittee, and they are tasked with looking at specific issues that we feel have identified are going to be really an important part of this plan update. The first of which is the automated connected electric, basically looking at the impacts of emerging technologies, particularly AV and CV technologies. The second of which is resilience, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Basically tasked with looking at environmental, weather, economic, and operational disruptors and thinking about how we can plan and design a transportation system that is better suited to absorbing and withstanding said disruptors. And then also a safety subcommittee that is helping to guide the update of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which we'll talk about a little later, and making sure that we're being consistent in our FTP and the Highway Safety Plan update. So at this point in the process, we've identified the overarching goals of the FTP, which you can see here. These are largely consistent with the goals of our previous FTP updates. However, based on some feedback from a steering committee, we have kind of strengthened some of the language that we use. For example, transportation choices that improve accessibility and equity is the new goal for this FTP. In our most recent update, that goal was simply more transportation choices for people in freight. So we're kind of building on some of the framework that we established in previous FTPs, but kind of strengthening the language and kind of strengthening our focus on what we think is really important to be addressing based on feedback from our steering committees. Across all of these goal areas, we've identified 4 kind of cross-cutting topics that really touch all of our goals and seem to be coming up over and over again in the discussions we're having in developing the plan, which we've identified here. Technology, again, looking at AVCB, ITS and traffic management system operations, big data, as well as new materials and shipping processes, e-commerce, 3D printing, things like that that have the potential to change the way that our freight works around the state. Resilience, and looking at potential external disruptors and our ability to adapt to those changes. State and interregional, basically looking at the way our transportation system focuses and facilitating interregional travel and their needs, and then also looking at regional and local, ensuring consistency with local planning efforts and addressing some of the issues that may be unique to urban areas, economic development, land use planning, congestion relief, things like that. So again, these are the 4 topics that we've identified as being really key and crucial to the update of the FTP. Our implementation element is likely going to be heavily centered around coming up with specific strategies to address some of these topics. And we're also really interested in getting your feedback on the types of things that you think that we should be looking at in relation to these topics, and your thoughts and opinions on how some of these topics have the potential to shape our transportation future. So we've actually developed surveys for each of these, which are posted on the FTP website, which I'll share a link for that a little later. And I think the links to each of the individual surveys were also shared in the agenda packet for this meeting too. So I would encourage you to take a look at that and let us know your thoughts, so we can help incorporate that as we look to update the plan. So what will we do with your input? So we're receiving input from the public through a number of different means, one of which is the surveys that I just mentioned. Another of which are these presentations. So basically, any feedback that I receive, following this presentation, any questions that you ask, anything that you emphasize that we should be looking at or is important to you, I'm taking that all down and then reporting that back up to our central office, and then it's fed through the steering committees for their considerations when they're having various discussions about how to drive the plan, and that inevitably helps to shape what actually ends up in the plan as well. So we have the surveys, we have these meetings, or we have these presentations, and we're also in the process of planning regional workshops, one for each FDOT district, that will give the public and regional stakeholders an opportunity to kind of engage with the plan and provide feedback to that mechanism. We were shooting to have those in early July. However, as you can imagine, some of the issues with COVID-19 have made facilitating an in-person workshop a little bit challenging. So we're right now kind of evaluating opportunities to potentially move that to an online format, or potentially considering pushing it out later in the year. So more to come on that, but there will be some form of opportunity of a large public stakeholder meeting to provide input as well. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the update to the Strategic Highway Safety Plan that is happening in coordination with the update to the FTP. So as you may know, Florida's statewide target for fatalities and serious injuries on our public roadways is 0. Very much consistent with a lot of the goals and strategies that Paula was talking about earlier on the meeting. We feel that 0 is the only acceptable goal, and that 1 traffic fatality or serious injury is too many. However, obviously there's still much work to be done to achieve this vision, and our strategic highway safety plan kind of provides a roadmap of how we're going to be able to drive those fatalities and serious injuries down to zero. So what the strategic highway safety plan is it's really a statewide coordinated safety plan that provides a comprehensive framework for reducing fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads, so both on the state system and off the state system as well. And it also identifies key safety needs and guides investment decisions towards specific strategies and countermeasures that have the most potential to save lives. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a specific safety subcommittee that is tasked with kind of providing specific steering and guidance to this specific portion of the plan, again, including representatives from different state and federal agencies, as well as law enforcement. Just a little bit of a preview of overview of kind of what goes into the update of the plan and where we are with it. So the first thing that we do and that we've done, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is provide kind of a high-level analysis of crash data and other trends that could be affecting fatalities and serious injuries across the whole state for a specified period of time. Kind of looking at that, digging into that data, we then select specific emphasis areas. So based on the crash trends that we're seeing, kind of putting those into categories and identifying what are some emphasis areas that we could really direct countermeasures to help reduce fatalities and serious injuries, and then develop strategies and action based on the data, improve and effective approaches. So where we're at right now is we've gone through the process of conducting that data analysis, and we have selected what those emphasis areas are going to be. And right now, what the steering committee is discussing is starting to formulate those strategies and those actions that we feel are best suited to addressing some of those crash trends we've identified. So it's a great time right now to get engaged and provide any thoughts or suggestions that you might have. Definitely will be taken into account and will help the steering committee as they kind of narrow down their focus. It also includes a review of other public and partner input that we receive as part of the FTP update process. Obviously, safety is something that ties into everything that we do. So we're constantly getting comments and feedback about safety as we're looking at other issues as part of the FTP. So we want to make sure that we're incorporating all of that good feedback as part of this. Coordination with other plans, MPO and regional and local, to make sure that we're complementing the things that each other are doing. And then the final step is review and approval by the signing partners, which include those that are on the subcommittee. To talk a little bit about some of the preliminary findings of that data analysis I mentioned. This is just kind of a view of overall roadway fatalities in Florida from 2012 to 2018 to just provide kind of a perspective of the direction that we're going. So we've seen somewhat of a plateau between 2016 and 2018. However, we're still experiencing fatalities higher than in the previous 5-year rolling average, and not decreasing. So there's obviously still quite a bit of work that we all need to do. Some more major takeaways, kind of more specifically from that crash data analysis. They found that the highest rate of fatalities and serious injuries is within the 20 to 35 age group. They also found that drivers 65 and older are more likely to be killed or seriously injured when involved in a crash, and that teen drivers, although they're more likely to be involved in crashes, they're much less likely to be killed or seriously injured in those crashes. They also found that our highest numbers of fatalities are in urban areas. More traffic, more people, makes sense. But when you look at highest fatality rates, so basically the number of crashes versus the amount of traffic, we do have higher rates in our rural areas. So higher speed, less lighting, higher instances of off-road crashes definitely continues to be a focus. Most fatalities and serious injuries do happen on state-maintained roadways through this time period, which is consistent with findings here locally. Most intersections and most fatalities and serious injury crashes related to intersections occur at four-way or T intersections, which makes sense. Most fatalities occur at night, and about half on lighted facilities. So in other words, about half of those are occurring on facilities that do not have lighting. And interestingly, more serious injuries occur during the day than at night. And then finally, most crashes involving a fatality or serious injury occur when the weather is clear, which, given our sunny climate, is to be expected. These are the emphasis areas that I mentioned earlier that have been identified as a result of that deep dive into the crash data. So we look at a variety of different types of kind of areas. So everything from looking at specific crash types and users, so lane departures, intersections, bike ped, motorcyclists, to also focusing on some of those demographic highlights that we focused on the previous slide. Aging road users, teen drivers, so kind of different types of emphasis areas and ways to look at it. But these are kind of what popped out from the data analysis and where we'll be looking to focus resources and develop actions and strategies that will help us to reduce the instances of fatalities and serious injuries. And then just this last slide, just kind of giving you some more perspective of trend-wise how we've been doing with these emphasis areas. As you can see, for the majority of these, we've been seeing a slight decrease in the number of serious injuries based on the two timeframes analyzed. However, troublingly, we've been seeing an increase in the number of fatalities for many of these emphasis areas as well. So again, a lot of important work still to be done, and we would really value any input into what we should be looking at considering when developing those strategies. So just to finish up, some additional resources. If you're interested in learning more about the plan, reading viewing some of the presentations that the steering committees have given, or summaries of their meetings, or if you're interested in becoming a friend of one of the subcommittees and being basically included in all of the meeting invites and receiving all these materials, you can visit our website at floridatransportationplan.com. We also have subsites for the safety subcommittee, as well as all the other cross-cutting topics and safety committees or subcommittees that we talked about on there as well. So a really good source of information regarding the ongoing update to the plan. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or just hear any input that you may have that we can report back up to central office and the steering committees.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going back through the chat. I think, Roger, did you have a comment or a question? Roger Mendez?
No, it's all right. I got it. I'm good now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then I'll just, Paula Flores had just mentioned in the chat, she was talking about, sort of changes in behavior for folks, in the future. A lot of us are working from home, or if you're like me, you're in an office that normally has about 7 people in it, and there's only 2 people here. That might be something to, that comes out in those surveys. So I'll just take the initiative and ask this question. I was looking through FDOT's, Twitter feed and District 7's Twitter feed, and it doesn't appear that there's any links to the surveys that you provided in the agenda item, Alex. Is there is there any effort or campaign to get these 4 surveys beyond folks like us who are already engaged? How do we get the general public? How do we get our coworkers and family members to be able to participate in these surveys?
Yeah, that's great feedback. We've been kind of relying on our kind of diverse partners in our steering committee to help us get the word out. But I think social media is definitely a good opportunity, and I can talk about that with our PIO folks to see if we can get that up. And welcome to any suggestions that you or others in the committees could have too. If there's any group that you think we should be talking to, or giving these presentations to, or reaching out to directly, it's definitely our intention to maximize our outreach and get as much input as possible. So that's really good feedback and a great comment.
And then I apologize, Sarah Hendricks, you had a question as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I was just looking at the emphasis on resilience, and has there been any thought or discussion at this point to name one of the main problems, which is climate change? I mean, is that still such a partisan issue that we can't talk about it and name it and address it?
No, I mean, that's definitely one of the key things that's being considered as part of the resiliency sub-area is the potential effects of sea level rise, impacts our coastal community, and kind of how we can start to think about becoming more resilient to its impacts. So that's definitely something that's being heavily discussed and focused in some of the subcommittee conversations about resiliency, for sure.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm adding to this is not just to react to the effects of it, but to what actions can we take to prevent the problem in the first place. For example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's
right.
Kind of the main point there.
Thanks. Thank you.
This is Lisa. On that note, I was watching another webinar presentation on resiliency, and they were talking about adding pandemics as another thing that we don't really list there in our resiliency response, but it's definitely had a significant impact on our roadway network, having the immediate pandemic. And between the supply chain to the working from home and the need for additional open space, so that might be something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned too, I think when you say resiliency, the first thing that comes to mind, at least for me, is response to climate change and sea level rise. And as we're discussing, that's definitely a focus. But outside of that too, they're interested in looking at all kinds of potential disruptors, economic disruptors like a recession, different demographic trends, and I think this pandemic is definitely it's definitely disruptive, if not anything else. I think that's being taken into account and definitely weighing heavy on the subcommittee's mind as we look to develop strategies. So that's great feedback.
Yeah, it's not listed specifically, so it might be a good one to keep in mind since it's not obvious. Okay.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I had made it to dig up the links to the surveys and the website and share with the committee to make it easier for everybody to participate, and then also forward on to your groups. So hopefully I'll figure it out. If not, I'll contact Alex and get something and share it with the group.
Yeah, and Sarah, go ahead. I heard you jump in there.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, about the strategic safety plan and, the fatalities and injuries, and, wondering how much do we know about, kind of the actions leading up to these crashes, and, what was going on, why were people speeding, are there any kind of patterns or trends that we can kind of identify, with regard to what's going on there?
Could you, I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time?
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to figure out, one of the big reasons why there's so many crashes is, a big piece of that is people speeding. So it makes me wonder, why are people speeding? Why are they in a hurry? And like, for example, are there a lot of people who are late for work? Or, is it not just, are there other things besides just being distracted and looking at your cell phone? If it's something where, there's a broad trend of people who are speeding and being careless because they're late to work and they're trying to rush to get to work, that would point to certain kinds of potential solutions that we could be, looking at. Like, for example, in the transportation demand management world, flex time, you know, enabling people to have some flexibility so that they're not having to clock in right at 8 a.m., but that they can get to work in a safe manner and arrive a little bit later and then perhaps leave a little bit later. You know, just simple strategies like that, you know, if we could understand a little bit better why people are speeding, we might be able to identify strategies to address those things to get people to stop speeding. That's just an example.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I never really thought about it from that perspective before. I think kind of the approach, at least from a DOT perspective, that immediately comes to mind is that, you know, we typically tend to think that of, you know, the roadway factors that are contributing to speeding, and you know, a road being out of line with this context, and some of those factors being the things that are driving that behavior. But yeah, I agree that I think it would be interesting to do kind of a different approach to try to identify some of those more psychological factors that it could be driving that. I don't know that that's something that is being looked at as part of the committee. I think it's kind of a high-level overview just based on some of the data that we've gleaned from the crash reports, which obviously wouldn't go into that level of intent typically. But I definitely think that's something that is interesting, and we should at least be discussing. So I can definitely bubble that feedback up.
Great, thanks, Alex.
Anybody else? Okay, Alex. Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, like Lisa was saying, if there is a way that you know, we can get some of the survey links out, or even if it's just you know, if you're able to run it back up the chain, that FDOT's social media pages, and whether it be District 7 or the main FDOT page, if they're able to promote some of these links, you know, people do follow. Obviously, people do follow some of those accounts for the traffic news and construction updates. So a lot of people are using Twitter as a news source. So it'd be great if we can get those surveys out and get a pretty wide sampling of folks to be involved. But thank you for your presentation. We'll go now on to new business, or old business and new business. Lisa?
Yes, I wanted to once again remind everybody July 20th at 1:30 is when we're going to have that awesome workshop with Hillsborough County Public Works Department on a variety of projects. We recess in July, so I'm going to say it's a, you know, like a lovely opportunity to tune in virtually, even if you're on vacation, to do that. We'll remind everybody about Mural Day, June 27th, for City of Tampa murals. We're going to be painted throughout the various communities with LGBTQ and unity themes at the various murals. The details will be posted on social media. Some of the things are still being edited and changing, so we just have a hold the date out there right now. So June 27th, please hold the date and come out with your paintbrush and your great energy and your sweaty old clothes. Let's see. Our big tip headering, the action item that you responded to earlier, is June 30th at 6 p.m. We are holding that virtually, so there are detailed directions on how to participate in that for public comments. This committee adopted it as is, but some other committees have suggested revisions, so there will be some discussion. I think. Michael, did you want to say anything more about your mural over in the West Shore area?
Well, I just wanted to say for all the murals, because I think that there are 4 locations, and you'll if you're following the city of Tampa, I think probably later this week or early next week they'll promote the locations. But from what I know of the locations, they're all near a pretty good restaurant. So while we might be on recess in July, your homework is to try and volunteer and participate in doing one of these street murals, and then to go get takeout at the nearest restaurant nearby. So that's just a suggestion, obviously. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about the project that is taking place in West Shore. I think the locations are West Shore, West Tampa, downtown, and then East Tampa, or really like VM Ybor area. So this will be a pretty big day, and I know the cities, they had such success with the downtown project at Franklin Twigs, and now it's going to be able to go across the city. And maybe coming up later on the year, we'll do a mural day for Hillsborough County, and then murals in Plant City and Temple Terrace. But as Paula talked about in her piece at the beginning, something as cheap as street art can make a difference in terms of making sure that we're providing a better environment for pedestrians and car drivers as well. So Lisa's working really hard on that. And then the city of Tampa, Danny Jorgensen, Cal Hardy, and that whole team putting this together and putting this idea together. And then Karen Kress as well from downtown. And I know Gina Torres is working on this as a project manager as well. So thank you all to getting this project moving and trying to spread it out as much as we can. But hopefully you're able to participate in one of those days. And I know Lisa will send some of that information out to the group as well after our meeting.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So we're in August. So I think we're done.
Yes. Any other comments or questions for the good order?
Yeah, one more reminder for the whole crew. So Constant Contact is the platform that we use to share the agendas. Because it is a multimedia service, sometimes your inbox will think that it's spam because other groups also use Constant Contact and you might have like unsubscribed. So it will go to your spam or junk folder. I work for the agency and I found my Livable Roadways agenda in my junk folder. So you'll definitely want to go find and look for it there, because that's where you'll be getting your individual panelists, join the meeting, special links that Sharon sends out. So you want to do that. Additionally, because the whole agency uses Constant Contact, if you decided that our connections to tomorrow, wherever the name of our newsletter is pesky and you didn't want to get it anymore, if you unsubscribe from any of our mailings, it can unsubscribe you for your Livable Roadways agendas. So if that happens, we have to go back and add you, and then you have to say, yes, you do want to get the Livable Roadways agenda again. So, okay, looks like Cal Hardy wants to share something, and he is muted. I'm going to unmute all again so that he can unmute himself. Cal, you should be able to unmute yourself to provide an update. Nope. Okay, I'm going to go down and specifically. Okay.
All
That's right.
I'm unmuted now. Y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cal.
All right. I got the kids with me, so you might hear some little girls. That's why. But I just wanted to bring up, we have the green spine has been advertised for construction. That's the phase 3A. That's going to be from Nebraska to 7th Avenue. So that's already been advertised for construction. So we should be going to construction soon on that. 46th Street gets advertised this Friday. That's in the walk bike plan, and that's in the university area. So that's one that we've presented on the past as a roundabout as part of that project as well that we added to the scope. And then let's see, 46th Street. The other one was Columbus Drive, which is one that I actually presented at Livable Roadways, is going to be advertised. We just got NCP from DOT to advertise on that one. So within the next few weeks, you'll see that one up. So those are three big signature projects that we're excited about. So those are there. And then I got 2 more public meetings coming up. 30th Street is by the Yingling Brewery, that whole area. We're redoing that street as a complete street with pedestrian crossings, widening the trail on one side, adding some low impact development or drainage improvements to one side to the swale that's already there, as well as looking at roundabouts at 30th and Yukon and 30th and Bougainvillea. So we have a public meeting for that on July 16th. I'll share an invitation with the Livable Roadways Committee through Lisa, and then that can get disseminated, I guess. But that's a big project that we have coming up for a public meeting. And then Florida, Nebraska, we're targeting a public meeting in August, and both of those will be virtual. So I think for the future, we'll probably keep going virtual, even maybe after this COVID stuff, because I think it's more efficient that way. But we'll record them. They'll be on the web if you can't attend live, but we will have a live virtual event for both of those as well. So I just wanted to let everybody know on those.
Very exciting stuff. Sure, yeah, send me the links. I'll send them out.
Cool. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. And we can't have a virtual Livable Roadways meeting without a guest appearance by kids. So I'm glad we've continued that streak. Usually my daughter is the guest appearance, but I'm glad Cal's kids could participate this time. Anything else? Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for participating. Stay safe. Hopefully we'll see you at Mural Day, but if not, we'll talk to you in August. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.